So it's about the ownership of your sense of self. That's your mistake, not the existence of your sense of self. But usually people will jump into conclusion, no self means there is no self. Well, who is then talking and deciding and making all these choices? And then if you actually start reading the suttas carefully, the Buddha never said there is no self. But actually people ask him, so is Master Gautama saying there is self? And he'll be quiet. So Master Gautama is saying there is no self, and he'll be quiet. Because either way, for this person, self is already there, ownership is already there, and he can't see the ownership. And that's what the problem is. So, do you feel like you're your own?
No.
How come?
Because I cannot control anything.
Well, in hindsight, when you think about it, sure. But say something that you wish for comes your way. Are you happy and elated on account of it? Something that you don't wish for comes your way. Are you sad about it?
Yes.
Means there is ownership in regard to the senses that can experience these things. So then you can't say, I don't regard myself as my own. You might wish to not regard yourself as your own, but practically facts are showing you that you do, because you still are liable to suffer and feel on account of change of things. And that's really the problem. It's not about denying things, denying yourself. It's just gratuitous ownership that we exercise over our own senses. And if you wonder whether you're exercising ownership or not, just ask yourself, would I suffer if something changes that I don't like? If you wouldn't suffer, means, okay, I'm along the right path. That's why like that self-honesty needs to become first. When the Buddha said, a person needs to understand there is good action, there is bad action, there is a good result, bad result, there is the given, there is this, there is the practice. Because if a person is denying all of that, then exactly they wouldn't necessarily see where the problem is and where to apply their effort. And then it would be like, there is no self, so what is there for me to do anyway? Yeah, there is no self, you can say that, but there is suffering. You're still liable to suffering, and that's what you need to do. And once you start doing that rightly, you get to understand, that's what the Buddha meant by not self. It's where the suffering is, not any kind of random theoretical scientific sense of experiment that proves that nothing's real and whatnot. Because when he approached the first after his enlightenment, they asked him, what teaching? And he didn't say, I'm telling you there is no self. He just said there is suffering and I'm teaching freedom from it. Because that's something that everybody can universally relate to. When he met the man before that, in the same sutta, when he was going down the road and this man sees him and says, you look very bright, very composed. Whose teaching did you follow to develop those faculties? And he said, I follow no one's teaching. I'm my own leader. I'm the supreme ruler of humans and gods. I'm the best. Which is pure fact. Nothing conceited about it. But in this man's eyes, through his own conceit, all he could see is I am the best. And he's like, so be it. And left. Didn't want to hear the rest, what the Buddha had to say. So clearly by the time the Buddha reached these other disciples, he realized if he approaches them with a sense of, I know what the truth is, they're going to be on defensive. But he does know what the truth is, but people won't hear it. So then he related that which they can relate to internally, which is you're liable to suffering. Even if you don't necessarily suffer, you are liable. And eventually you will have to. Old age, sickness, death, inevitable. And I'm teaching freedom from it. And I was like, okay. I want that. And that's how they started listening to him, although they tried to dismiss him first, because he wasn't part of the group anymore. Yeah, boy. That's it. So that's in answer to the question, there is no self, there is self, but you should try and not own it. Because you can just say, there is no self, there is both, there is neither. Factually, you remain liable to suffering and you don't know the way out. And that's the core of the teaching, suffering and freedom from it. And that brings me to practice of metta. Well, you want to ask yourself, why do you want to do it? Why are you doing it? What's the purpose of your meditation?
Personally, I want to focus myself. That is my main thing.
And what would be the purpose of that?
To calm my mind.
And what would be the purpose of that? Why do you prefer a calm mind?
Again, yes, free of suffering then.
Because a non-calm mind bothers you. So why go a round way about it when you can start thinking about what makes calm mind calm? Or what disrupt the mind? Does sense desire disrupt the mind?
Yes.
If you want something that you don't have? Does somebody says something upsetting and you refuse to let go of it, does that disrupt the mind? So you realize you don't need to do meditation to calm your mind. You need to stop disrupting it yourself with your own choices and actions. And then meditation comes out of that. Usually people hear about metta meditation and they use it wrongly, in a sense of you try to replace issues with metta. Like, oh, if I do metta, it will come in place of this. But the place of your problem is not in things. The place of your disturbed mind is not in because somebody said something upsetting to you. It's because your mind got upset on account of something that's being said to it. And you can't replace that. You can only train it to not do that anymore. And then you realize, I don't need to suffer amid suffering. That's what the Buddha said, if the mind is developed, you would endure the unpleasant, harsh insults, words, attacks, in the same sense you endure wind, cold, sun, like elements. Completely nothing personal about it. But you take the ownership of it and it's automatically personal. And then you don't know how to deal with it, and then you hear about metta, and not you specifically, everybody does like that. And then you hope, if I develop this meditation, some meditation will push this whole thing out and I will never be able to get angry or something like that. You get angry by giving into anger. You get lustful by giving into lust, by making choices based upon it, by having non-restraint. Because that's what's in common, by the way, to pursuing sensual desire, acting out of anger, acting out of carelessness, is lack of restraint, lack of self-control. So then you could draw a line and say that, oh, so your mind gets disturbed when you don't have enough control over yourself. And that's entirely up to you. Nobody can control you for you. And people don't have enough control over themselves because they don't think enough about it. They expect circumstances to control them, whatever, tradition, duty, values, and they do to some extent, but you want to take it on a new level whereby you take control of your sense restraint, of your verbal actions, of your physical actions. And that's already the beginning of wisdom. 5 precepts, or then take it further, 8 precepts, and so on.
So we have to always start with the 5 precepts.
Not just you have to start, you always stay within there, by the way. Like even when you start practicing meditation, then you don't do it it's within the 5 precepts. So it's just continuation of the same principle. Of that sense of non-disturbed mind that comes from controlling your actions. That's why literally, in its core, the Buddha said he teaches action and freedom from action. And action is already a choice. It's already on a level of an action. Hey boy, it's okay. It's okay, man.
Maybe he wants to go out?
No, I think he's just strangers in his space. He wants to let you know who the boss is.
Oh, yes.
Okay, we know. Not used to.
So, I mean, like, you have to be very disciplined and following precepts and all that before we can actually develop wisdom.
Well, that's already the beginning of wisdom. It's a mistake to separate it. It's a mistake to think, oh, wisdom will then come after I do this. Doing that is already the beginning of wisdom. Because you're already becoming transparent in regard to your own motives, where your intentions and choices are rooted. And then you would know, oh, this is unwholesome. Like, this is rooted in completely unskillful desires in me. The world can praise it. They can say, this is a great thing to do, you have so much passion. But from the standpoint of wanting to have a mind that is calm, you realize, no, this is incompatible. I can't have that. And the reason why people don't entertain these things is because they don't accept, they don't look at it, they're not transparent, they ignore it. Because everybody wants to have their mind calm. Even if people say they don't, they do. That's why you always pursue pleasure and stuff, because it's satisfaction, it's already a form of calmness. And that's why people are dependent on it, because they don't know any other type of satisfaction, except like sensual satisfaction or satisfaction through ill will and retaliation and so on.
Okay, so my question is, so if the Buddha intended to not be worshipped as a god or any part of his physical self idolized, as a Buddhist, is it acceptable to visit places like the Dalada Maligawa to worship his sacred tooth, or Adam's Peak to worship his footprint?
The thing is, not all people are neither Buddhists nor do they practice for the same reason. So if you visit Maligawa because it will just remind you of the Buddha and the possibility of enlightenment, that's fine. And the Buddha did say, yeah, when they asked him, what should we worship when you die? There were no statues, and he said, make no statues of me. He was only came later with the Greeks when they came to India. But it got quickly established because it's easier for people to worship something that resembles a person, or rather than these symbols that already require a degree of wisdom and recognition. However, the Buddha did say you can worship the symbol, like the Bodhi tree. They will remind you of enlightenment. You might think about enlightenment. You might spur something in you that you maybe want to do it. You should worship like the sign of an alms bowl, which means there's a possibility to give up the world and be a renunciate. An empty seat that reminds you of the teaching and so on. So it's all these symbolic things. Just it might make somebody think about the Dhamma, and that's it. That was the sole purpose of worship. But nowadays, most people worship out of superstition, and that has absolutely nothing to do with Buddhist teaching or Buddhism. But that is what Buddhism is today. What every other religion is today. It's firstly superstition. And then within that, those who are interested in more than just superstition get to find out the teaching. So if you visit Maligawa so you can pass your test exams, it has absolutely nothing to do with anything the Buddha taught. If you visit Maligawa because you want your wishes to come true, again, it's completely misplaced. If you visit because, and another way of misplacing it, if you think you can visit shrines and somehow get closer to enlightenment simply by physically visiting, stupas and whatnot, there's absolutely nothing to do with it. The enlightenment can only come through the self-restraint, understanding and wisdom. And so in that sense, this can be helpful. You get inspired maybe, and then you want to read the Buddhist teaching once you visited some statue or something. But it's a very remote sense, not like, and I often encounter people who think if as long as you worship, you're somehow getting closer to Nibbana. And that's just wishful thinking.
That is how it is presented in.
Of course, because it's much easier than if I tell you, no, you need to be perfectly restrained. You need to give up things you like, and sometimes endure things you don't like. You don't want to hear that. Only few people can hear that and accept it.
Yeah.
So it's easier for me as well to just pay respect and chant this, and you'll be fine.
Give a few danas and all that. And
But what did Buddha say about Amisa Puja and Pratipatti, those days in his teachings?
Nothing.
Nothing.
He said about alms and being generous, not just to monks but in general.
In
Right.
general.
That's like making money, but that's not bringing you closer to enlightenment.
Right.
They're just bringing you closer to a more wholesome mind, better rebirths and so on. But enlightenment, you need to abandon it all. You can't give your way in terms of gifts to enlightenment. It doesn't work like that. And that's the problem. It's not a problem that you don't necessarily pursue enlightenment, but the problem is when people then intentionally develop a view that, I don't need to pursue it, and I can do this, and by doing these random things, I'm somehow also getting closer to it. And because of that, you never really admit to yourself that you're not getting closer to enlightenment just by random acts of generosity.
And even good karma, when you accumulate
It's still
so
karma.
many, it is still karma. And
That's the
you
whole
still
point.
have to-
That's what I mean. He teaches action and freedom from action. And action is good action and bad action. So yes, you need to replace bad action with good action, but now you need to abandon that as well if you really want enlightenment. And for that, you can't have good action somehow result in self-canceling action and you become fully enlightened arahant. Because then literally we would just prescribe, give this, give this, give this, and you'll be enlightened. But it didn't. Never.
It has to come within anyways, right? Somebody cannot, somebody can
Yes,
guide you,
yes.
but you
That's
you
why
have
he
to do the
himself
work.
said, whatever is to be obtained by the manly effort, I've done it. And that's why it cannot be taken away, because you do it for yourself. It doesn't depend on the external factors. It's not given to you sudden divine providence. It's just, no, it doesn't come that way. So in that sense, that's what I mean, if you're clear as to why and what for, and keep clarifying if you're not clear, then you get to realize what you really want. And then you get to do it properly as well, without misconceiving it. And you might be fine, maybe enlightenment seems too far out of my reach. But let me then focus on things that are not without my reach, that the Buddha himself, whom I respect enough to follow the teaching, said a layman should do. But it's when laymen, especially in the West, I'm Buddhist for 20 years practicing, and they don't even keep the precepts. Doing meditation retreats and stuff, still drink alcohol and no restraint. And I was see, the contradiction you're living is because of your own ignorance, no one else's fault. But if you were to make the effort, instead of having a wishful thinking of your jhanas and whatnot, focus on what you are first and perfect that. And then you'll see whether you're happy with it, or whether you will become a monk or commit your last right to the retreat. But they want to have it all at the same time. Oh, I can also practice for enlightenment, and I can also, have my desires as a lay person and so on.
So
And
you
that's-
essentially have to pick one. in
You
a
have
way.
to recognize what your situation is and take responsibility for it.
Okay.
Because that's what I mean. If you renounce the world, it's because you chose to do so. If you don't renounce the world, it's because you chose to do so. There's no like external authority or criteria that demands from you to stay a lay person or not.
It's purely by choice.
Yeah, but every choice means you're responsible for it. And that's the bit that people try to avoid because it's unpleasant. See, if I accept responsibility that I'm not renouncing the world, means I have to accept responsibility for anything that comes at me from that world that I haven't renounced. I have to accept responsibility for anything that results out of my unenlightened mind. I can't complain about it because I choose to remain in the environment where these things can happen. And that's not easy to bear necessarily for everyone. So people would then try to kind of mask that and then at the same time develop a sense that, but no, I am still practicing renunciation and everything while I'm not really. So you just need to learn how to be really, really, even brutally honest with yourself, nobody else. What are you doing and why you're doing it? Same, I want to meditate. Why? Why? Because I don't want to suffer. So how do I suffer? Do I suffer when I don't meditate? Not necessarily. Do I suffer when I act out unwholesomely? That's the root of my suffering. So let me deal with that and then maybe meditation will become more obvious later. But for people, as I said, meditation becomes extension of what I want fulfilled for me. And that's why it won't work. Not in that manner at least.
Oh yeah, so I have a question I was thinking about. So I was wondering how do you decide what is like a comfort or something that you need to give up? Because I was, my question, so also another part I was thinking about was the use of technology in Buddhism. So like, like phones, for example, is that allowed? Is that not if you were pursuing the path of enlightenment?
Those are tools.
Okay.
Tools are not like necessarily wrong, it's the purpose of their use. So if you use your phone to cheat, steal, engage in sensuality, spread hate, it's wrong. But it's not the usage of the phone that's wrong, it's your intention and your action that's being acted out by the phone.
Okay.
If you use the phone to Google the suttas and read the translations online, it's of course not wrong. If you use the phone to communicate when communication is needed, it's not wrong. If you use the phone to just chit-chat, random gossip, it's wrong, but again, not because of the phone, but because of the intention behind your action and what you're doing.
Okay.
So that's why it's not prescribed that you have those Christian orders where you shun, or you must shun anything new and stuff. Not at all. It's the tool. You mustn't shun your responsibility for your actions. But people try to throw away the tools because then they will blame responsibility on the tools. See, it's the phone's fault. It's the internet's fault that I can't be restrained. No, it's your own fault that you're not restrained.
Okay, so technology is okay and allowed just to
Exactly. It's why you're using it for.
Right. Okay.
It always defines whether it's right or wrong. Yeah. So that's why it can't be a blanket one. Oh, technology is absolutely fine, or it's absolutely wrong, because people will use it for different purposes. Same, like knives, forks. You can use to harm somebody with it,
Right.
or you keep very practical. You can't survive in the wilderness without it. So.
So then another question I had was, okay, so the concept of, reincarnation and good karma and bad karma. So, I guess like if my understanding is correct, when you accumulate good karma and bad karma, it goes, I guess, in terms of when you're being reborn, in terms of, how you'll be reborn into your next life, essentially. How do you, and like, so my question is, I guess, essentially like, how about this current life? Like, how do you end suffering in the present?
Right. Well, yeah, that's the point. If you were to uproot the desire from your mind and conceit, you would be uprooting any basis for suffering.
Okay.
So that's how you do it.
Okay.
But that's something you can't do.
Right.
In a sense of just perform. That's what I mean. Like you can't just be generous pay your way to enlightenment with just generosity or something, because that's just
Right.
another level of doing. So that's why the Buddha said, first you need to be sense restrained.
Okay.
You need to keep the precepts and restrain your desires and only recognize things that, okay, I need to give into this or something like that, but not like as a blanket mode of being whereby you always say yes and then only sometimes say no when you can't get what you want.
Right.
It's other way around. It's more like, no, I'll keep myself in check only when I can't, but even then means I'm responsible for it. That's the first step. There has to be, like, to fully accept that you are responsible. See, people think they suffer because things are unpleasant,
Right.
but you don't. You suffer because you resist the displeasure that you feel.
So suffering itself is a concept.
Pain is not suffering.
Right.
Resisting pain by default is suffering. That's why the craving is the root of suffering. Not feeling is the root of suffering.
Okay.
So if you want to be free from suffering this life, you have to stop craving, stop resisting, stop indulging
Right.
what you feel right here, right now. And the first step is to stop acting blindly on account of what you feel right here, right now.
Right.
Then you get to round up and see, okay, so you're not acting by the body, you're not acting by the speech, and then you get to see how your mind is affected by what you feel right now. And that's where the craving is, in your mind. But you can't uproot the craving in your mind while your physical actions are still very much engaging and rooted in that same craving.
So suffering itself is like how you perceive something, or how you conceive and the how you conceive something, and
Yeah.
that is what brings you that suffering, right?
Yes, it's slightly more immediate than that, though.
Okay.
It's literally, when you are touched by disagreeable, your mind automatically leans away from it.
Right.
That's the default.
Okay.
When you are touched by agreeable, your mind automatically leans towards
To
it.
Right.
And it's that leaning is the root of suffering,
Oh. Okay.
not being touched in the first place.
Okay.
That's why in the cases of fully enlightened monks, sometimes they got attacked on the road and stabbed and stuff, and they didn't suffer on account of it. That doesn't mean they didn't feel the physical discomfort on account of it. They did.
They did, right.
But you realize that was never really the problem. The problem was you not being able to not lean towards or against when you are touched by a feeling.
Okay.
And you couldn't do it because you haven't understood it. And that's why the sense restraint needs to come first, because by default people would first and foremost blame the external world for whatever they felt.
Okay.
See, I feel this suffering because such and such person upset me. No, such and such person had something to say disagreeable to you, but you leaning away, trying to get rid of, trying to override the disagreeability in you, that's your suffering, not what they said. But if you never look in that direction, you remain blaming them and then feeling justified in hating them and so on. So first that needs to be restrained, and then you get to understand where the problem really is.
Okay. Thank you.
Are you done asking questions?
Yeah.
I think I have one more. So, do
Go
you
ahead.
have any? I'm just thinking. I don't know. I was just wondering. So I was just thinking, like, how can I make sure to use the Eightfold Path and such, like, in my daily life, or like making sure, like, the 5 precepts also, but then also making sure that I, follow right action, right speech.
Well, within the 5 precepts, that's already a type of right action.
Right. Okay.
So you can see, like, you can follow 5 precepts by the body, and follow them by the speech, and then you can extend the same practice onto the mind.
Okay.
And that's kind of the order you can develop as well. You can't, like, extend them on the mind while your body is not restrained.
Right.
But usually people associate, precepts are just like bodily commandments or something like that.
Yeah.
No, they're principles that you need to start applying first onto the body.
Okay.
But then, yes, so you're not obviously killing anybody physically, but you might have harmful thoughts that you're harboring, entertaining, thinking intentionally. You will not act, you will not harm physically anybody, but you might be gossiping or slandering somebody out of the same ill will
Okay.
they would result in someone else's committing killing. So then you realize, so yeah, I'm obviously keeping the 5 precepts on the level of the body, but why don't I restrain my mind from thinking bad and harmful thoughts towards others? So you use the same principle of 5 precepts and restraint by applied now on an even more accurate level, which is the level of your mind.
Mind, okay.
So even if you're not, you're not drinking, stealing, cheating, lying, and so on, but am I thinking about these things?
Okay.
Am I thinking thoughts that are rooted in the same basis that result sometimes in cheating or stealing, getting what I want on account of, sort of screwing up others and so on? Am I thinking thoughts that are just unrestrained, sensual? Am I thinking thoughts that are maybe not sensual but careless, harmful and to me, to others, and then not do it on that mental level either? Because it is a choice as well. It's just most people are not aware of that choice because they're not even aware of the bodily choices they make. But once you start restraining that, these will become more obvious.
Okay. So the key essentially is to start by controlling those actions physically and then moving on to the mind.
Yeah, and then the mind will become apparent
Right. Okay.
within those physical restraints that you just created. Yeah.
I got it.
So it's like trying to tame wild dogs while they're still wild. If you keep trying to chase them or something, good luck. No way.
Yeah.
So you first put up a fence.
Okay.
You round up a perimeter, and then within that you get to see, you get to learn about it, and then become more familiar with it, and then they start to listen to you. But most people want to arrive at that stage of like full control, commanding the senses in the mind without even having set up the basic fence around the behavior. And then they hope like somehow meditation will magically
Take them
bridge their gap.
Right. Okay.
Oh, I don't want this religious side of restraint and whatever. Just teach me meditation and enlightenment.
Right.
Like, I mean, even when the Buddha died, there was all these arahants, like 500 fully enlightened monks came together and thought, let's recite the teaching so that it gets remembered. And then they said, well, what do we recite first? Do we recite our rules, patimokkha, sense restraint, precepts, or do we recite Dhamma first? And you would think, of course, you recite Dhamma. He says, no, there is no Dhamma without the basis of rules. So we must recite the rules first. So they called one who knew all the rules, and he recited all the rules and how they came to be. And only when they was completely exhausted, okay, now let us recite the words of the Buddha himself. Not before the rules have been recited. So if the arahants needed to follow that order, if the fully enlightened people needed to follow that order, what is to say for somebody who's just starting the practice? It's not optional.
Most of the time it is the other way around now.
Oh, yeah, completely.
Yes,
Yeah. I know in the
very,
West
very
especially,
confusing.
because in the West people don't even have the traditional kind of imposed values, and anything vaguely religious, it's dismissed as a religious oppression. So you can't even talk about restraint without them associating that with crazy Christian times, the 17th and 18th century in Europe, where it's just like you kill people who don't keep commandments, which is against the commandment, but the irony was lost on them, I guess. So, and then they hear the esoteric Buddhism, whatever else, and then they hear meditation and they think, oh, if I just get the right meditation, that's it. I don't need to deal with anything else. And sometimes you have all these other schools of Buddhism, like later on that came, they very much cater to that. Oh, you don't need this. No, you can be married and be a monk. You can do this and be a monk. You can do this and be enlightened. It's like, sounds like one of those fake adverts that you can have it all for $1.99, Yeah, it's just. But people believe in it because they want to believe in it, because it's easy.
And they are comfortable.
Of course, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Otherwise,
Oh, I don't need to give anything up.
It's so difficult to achieve.
Yeah. But that's what I mean. You might realize that it's not that difficult if you actually start accepting responsibility for what you already are doing. It's nothing out of the ordinary. It's just because you ignore it, you keep it in this projected. Oh, I can't. No, wait. Let me accept this first, and then I'll see. Maybe I can get more. Maybe I want more. So you get to learn as a result of it.
Can I ask a question? How long have you been in Morocco?
15 years.
15 years?
2005. I started as a layman, but a couple of years before that, like reading the suttas and keeping the precepts.
So you were always interested in that?
No. Only when I was 22.
Okay.
Before that, I was very much not interested in any of that. Yeah. But at the same time, I was becoming dissatisfied with just a generic, sensual lifestyle. And I got interested in meditation, as every Westerner does, without religion.
Right.
But I had like nobody really like to ask, or Buddhist groups, nothing, and not really other religious groups at the time. Certainly not in my city. So I was just going to go to a library and read the books, religion and philosophy. So I was reading everything, Hinduism and yoga, all sorts of things, Christian mystics, everything, and nothing was, no. And then I came accidentally across a book of a Yugoslavia monk in Sri Lanka in the 60s.
Wow.
And then he translated the actual suttas. And yeah, I read the first sutta, it was suffering, freedom, liability, and I had that recognition that, yeah, my life is really good. I was actually working for an American company, more money than I can spend, absolutely no problem with that, but at the same time you recognize you're liable to things changing, and I could not ignore that. Most people can ignore that. Oh, it will all work out for the best. It's like, yeah, but what if it doesn't? You see people around you, it doesn't always work out for the best, but you just pretend that your life will always be in the best manner you want it. So I was just becoming aware of the fact, there was nothing particular bothering me, but I was becoming aware of the fact that some things could bother you, and you won't have a control over it. And that was beginning to bother me. Yeah, that recognition. So then I sort of wind down my lifestyle, bit by bit, saved up some money and went to become a monk. And because that was the thing, I felt responsible. Like, oh, I don't have to become a monk. It's not an imperative. But if I choose to stay in this life, whatever, in 30 years' time, if things that I don't like happen to me, it's on me. Because I chose to stay. Because now I know there is a way out in terms of the Buddhist teaching, but I chose to not follow it. Means I'm now responsible for whatever stays as a result of not following the way out. Some people decide to stay, but to me, that was not the right choice. Doesn't mean it was easy to leave,
Of course, because.
but it was, it felt like a duty, something worth doing.
I understand impermanence in like a logical way.
Exactly.
But my parents are older, and I don't think they are going to be around too long. How do I prepare myself to? I mean, I know scientifically, logically.
Yeah, that's not the knowledge. Like, that's the information. You have information about impermanence, but you have no understanding of it. Because if you were truly to understand impermanence, it results in the removal of any ownership you might have over your parents and your own life. But you still have the ownership because you still feel that you're liable to suffer, exactly. Which means you haven't understood impermanence then. So you need to understand impermanence by starting, like, not in that logical manner, but realize that, like, what you're currently feeling now, right here, right now, whatever, good or bad or neutral, doesn't matter what it is, it's already something that's not in your control. And you don't need to go into like psychological and scientific explanation as to why it's not in your control. It doesn't matter why. The fact is that it's not in your control, yet you're acting as if it is in your control. I mean, did you have any say in your parents getting old? It's even inconceivable as an abstract thought to have a say in it. Yet here we are acting as if it shouldn't happen. So you can continue acting like that, and that's why you remain liable to, when those things happen, remain liable to being affected by them. Or you can start uprooting those gratuitous wrong views. Yeah, but that's what we say. You didn't say, oh, watch your nostrils and you become an arhat. No, you reflect on the nature of things, the nature of your actions, the nature of your choices. Think about it. Because by thinking about it, you'll stop ignoring the obvious, that you're not in control. And people ignore the obvious because lack of control, from the point of view of control, is very unpleasant. It's anxiety and fear and But it's only so because you completely ignore it and then only sometimes it's thrown on you. But if you actually start thinking about it in a measured manner and stop ignoring it, it will cease to scare you. Because you realize, well, whether I'm afraid or not, this is like a factual state of affairs. That's when I was saying that this morning to one of the monks. That's why, like, when the Buddha died, some monks who were not fully enlightened, they were like, now what will happen now? But the monks that were enlightened, they were saying, of course, how can that which was born not die? I mean, for them it became inconceivable to grieve over it. It's madness in a way. How can you, like, they couldn't fathom it. How can you grieve over it? Over something that's obviously have to go. Yet people grieve over things that have to go. And they know they have to go, but they still grieve over things. Why? Because you ignore the fact that we will go and only address it when you have no choice about it. Same, like contemplation of, I'll get old, I'll get sick. And that's why the Buddha said you're responsible for that, because you keep yourself pretty much intoxicated, like a drunk man, with life, with health, and with youth. You know it will go away, but you don't think about it. And by not thinking about it, you intoxicate yourself with it while it's present. That's why a healthy man always thinks he'll be healthy. And even when you think about non-healthy, you think like in a second person manner, not like something that directly applies to me. Because if I start thinking, no, it's this health, it's this youth, you're going to feel that. And you're so used to avoiding what you feel, or only chasing what you want to feel, that by default you will be turning away from it. So that's why the Buddha compared the practice of Dhamma as going against the grain, against the stream. Not like denying everything, but basically seeing where things are rooted and then stop ignoring it. By not ignoring it, you see the origin of this. Oh, I'm intoxicated because now I'm healthy, but do I have even say in this health? Who knows, I might be having cancer growing in me or something like that. You get scared. Well, the only reason you got scared because you refused to think about it. It's like the most certain thing, by the way, when you think about it. Death.
Yeah.
As soon as you're born, it's absolutely a must. Everything else is optional. Yet the most certain thing is like the last thing on people's minds. Because they choose to put it last and keep it last and press it there to be last because it's too unpleasant to admit it. But if you train yourself towards that unpleasantness, it won't be unpleasant anymore. It's only unpleasant because the dog chases you only because you start running away from it. If you stand your ground, it won't chase you. It won't even attack you. But if you give in to the run, it will go after you. And that's exactly, you start giving in to avoiding this, and that's how it goes after you.
That's it too. Yeah, no, this is very insightful.
Okay,
Thank you,
yes.
Hermitage.
Yeah, you're welcome. Good questions.
Mhm.